Paiduo. Titus chapter 2 verses 11 to 12 KJV states, "For the grace of God that bringeth salvation hath appeared to all men," verse 12, teaching us that, denying ungodliness and worldly lusts, we should live soberly, righteously, and godly in this present world. From Titus chapter 2 verse 12, it is clear that the grace of God is a supernatural teacher. What does it teach? Teaching people to deny ungodliness, that is, sexual activity outside of marriage, and worldly lusts in this present world, so that they can live soberly, righteously, and in a godly manner. This is important to know because it shows you that if there are things that you need to be taught in regards to living a life of sexual purity, the grace is that supernatural force that will do that for you. So what does it mean when Titus chapter 2 verse 11 teaches that the grace is a supernatural teacher? To answer this question, the Greek language must be consulted. The word teaching from Titus chapter 2 verse 12 is from the Greek word paiduo. The Greek word paiduo is defined as to train children, to be instructed or taught or learn, to cause one to learn. To chastise. A. To chastise or castigate with words, to correct. Of those who are molding the character of others by reproof and admonition. Blue Letter Bible 2016. From the above bullet point definitions, you should be able to understand what defines the Greek word paiduo. From the above bullet point definitions, you should be in a better position to understand that the grace of God supernaturally trains people, instructs people, teaches people, causes them to learn, chastises them, castigates them, corrects them, and molds them by reproof and admonition. In regards to what? In regards to denying ungodliness and worldly lusts, enabling them to live soberly, righteously, and godly in this present world. This should be a clear indication that you will need the grace of God to live the life of holiness and sexual purity that God has called them to live. If you need a supernatural trainer regarding living a life of holiness where you do not engage in sexual sin, know that the grace of God is that supernatural trainer that you require. Whatever you need to be taught in regards to living a holy life which is free from sexual sin, know that the grace has been made available by God to supernaturally train you. This means that you do not have to worry about not knowing certain things, as the grace will teach you what you need to know when you have faith in the grace. Arneomai. Titus chapter 2 verses 11 through 12 KJV states, "For the grace of God that bringeth salvation hath appeared to all men," verse 12, teaching us that, denying ungodliness and worldly lusts, we should live soberly, righteously, and godly in this present world. The AMPC version of Titus chapter 2 verse 12 states, "For the grace of God, his unmerited favor and blessing, has come forward, appeared, for the deliverance from sin and the eternal salvation for all mankind," verse 12. It has trained us to reject and renounce all ungodliness, irreligion, and worldly, passionate desires, to live discreet, temperate, self-controlled, upright, devout, spiritually whole lives in this present world. From these verses, you know that the grace of God has the ability to teach you to deny all ungodliness, that is, sexual sin, and worldly lusts. It enables you to reject and renounce all ungodliness, worldly desires, to live discreet, temperate, self-controlled, upright, devout, spiritually whole lives in this evil world of sexual sin temptation. From this, you should clearly see that in order to live the holy life without sexual sin that God called you to live in, you need to utilize the grace of God. As you study the study of the nature of the grace of God, you should clearly see that the grace was designed to assist you fully in your quest to live a godly life that is free from sexual sin and all that sexual sin can throw at you. In order to fully understand the magnitude of the grace's ability to enable you to deny all encountered ungodliness and worldly lusts, it is important to expand on the word denying found in Titus chapter 2 verse 12. Once this word is expanded upon, you will see the important supernatural role that the grace of God plays in regards to enabling you to live a godly life that is free from sexual activity outside of marriage. In order to do this, it is necessary to consult the Greek language. The word denying from Titus chapter 2 verse 12 is from the Greek word arneomai. The Greek word arneomai is defined as 1. To deny, 2. To deny someone, A. To deny oneself, to disregard his own interests or to prove false to himself, act entirely unlike himself. 3. To deny, abnegate, abjure. 4. Not to accept, to reject, to refuse something offered. Blue Letter Bible 2016. From the above definitions, you should be able to know what clearly defines the Greek word arneomai. From the above definitions, you should also be able to have a better understanding of what it means when Titus chapter 2 verse 12 states that the grace has been made available to teach you to deny ungodliness and worldly lusts. From the above definitions, you know that this denying that the grace of God has been made available to teach you regarding encountered ungodliness, worldly lusts, consists of denying, that is, ungodliness and worldly lusts, that is, sexual activity outside of marriage. Denying someone, that is, a person that is attempting to lure you into sexual sin. Denying yourself, that is, ungodliness and worldly lusts, to the point where you disregard your own interests and don't even act like yourself. Abnegating, that is, ungodliness and worldly lusts, that is, sexual activity outside of marriage. Abjuring, that is, ungodliness and worldly lusts, that is, sexual activity outside of marriage. Not accept, that is, ungodliness and worldly lusts, that is, sexual activity outside of marriage. Rejecting, that is, ungodliness and worldly lusts, that is, sexual activity outside of marriage. Refusing something, that is, ungodliness and worldly lusts, that is, sexual activity outside of marriage, offered. When you look at the above definitions of the Greek word arneomai, you should be able to get an understanding of what the grace can provide you supernaturally in regards to teaching you to deny the ungodliness, that is, sexual sin, and worldly lusts that you will encounter in this world. Grace of God for every danger. 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 7, AMPC. And to keep me from being puffed up and too much elated by the exceeding greatness, preeminence of these revelations, there was given me a thorn, a splinter in the flesh, a messenger of Satan, to rack and buffet and harass me, to keep me from being excessively exalted. 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 8, AMPC. 3 times I called upon the Lord and besought him about this, and begged that it might depart from me. 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 9, AMPC. But he said to me, My grace, my favor and loving kindness and mercy are enough for you, that is, sufficient against any danger and to enable you to bear the trouble manfully. For my strength and power are made perfect, fulfilled and completed, and show themselves most effective in your weakness. Therefore I will all the more gladly glory in my weakness and infirmities, that the strength and power of Christ the Messiah may rest, yes, may pitch a tent over and dwell upon me. The above verse of 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 9, AMPC, says that the grace of God is sufficient against any danger that you could possibly encounter. What is an example of a danger that you can face in your quest to live a holy life that is free from sexual sin? That is right, sexual sin temptation. As you strive to live a life of holiness using the grace of God, know that sexual sin will be one of the biggest dangers and enemies that you will face. Why? Because sexual sin is in direct opposition to a true godly life of holiness. So as you face the danger of sexual sin temptation, in your quest to live a holy life, know that it is the grace of God that has been made available to you to defeat that danger, sexual sin, and all dangers. Archeo. 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 9 KJV states, And he said unto me, My grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. In this verse, God has stated that His grace is sufficient for you. What does it mean that God's grace is sufficient? To answer this question, the Greek language must be consulted. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9, KJV, states, And he said unto me, My grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. The words is sufficient from 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9 is from the Greek word archeo. The word archeo is defined as A. To be possessed of unfailing strength, to be strong, to suffice, to be enough, to defend, ward off, to be satisfied, to be contented. Blue Letter Bible 2016. From the above bullet point definitions of the Greek word archeo, it should be evident how supernaturally amazing the grace of God is in its sufficiency. When 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 9 states that the grace of God is sufficient for you, it means the following: that grace is possessed with unfailing strength, is strong, is able to defend, is able to ward off, etc. When you are using the grace of God actively in your life, you need to understand that the grace is more than sufficient to enable you to live the holy life that God wants you to live, that life that is free of sexual sin. Never think that the grace of God is not enough to get the job done, as it is more than enough. It is more than sufficient. When you find yourself in weakness. When you find yourself in a state of weakness in your attempt to live a holy life in this immoral world, this does not mean that the battle has been lost or is over. This means that this is the perfect setting for the grace of God to manifest fully in your life. Why is this the case? Because the grace works best when you are weak. Some will say that weakness is not good, but when you look at weakness in conjunction with grace, you understand that weakness sets the stage for grace to manifest mightily in your life. There should be no more fearing weakness, as the state of weakness is a prime situation that the grace of God seeks to operate powerfully. How do you know this? The God's Word translation of 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 9 ESV states, But he said to me, My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. From this verse, you should see clearly that weakness is an excellent condition for the grace of God to work and manifest. No more having to fight using your strength to live a holy life without sexual sin. Come to that point where you admit your weakness to God, rely fully on the grace, and watch His power manifest in a perfect manner to live that life of holiness without sexual sin. The world will say that weakness is a weakness, but you now know that this is not the case, as you are a born-again Christian that knows how to couple your weakness with the grace of God. Grace for every need. Hebrews chapter 4 verse 16 AMPC. Let us then fearlessly and confidently and boldly draw near to the throne of grace, the throne of God's unmerited favor to us sinners, that we may receive mercy for our failures and find grace to help in good time for every need, appropriate help and well-timed help, coming just when we need it. From the above verse, you know that the grace of God has been made available to assist you with every need. It is appropriate help, well-timed help, coming just when you need it. As you strive to live a truly authentic, holy life that is free from sexual activity outside of marriage, know that you will face challenges, as the Word of God clearly states that many are the afflictions of the righteous. Psalm chapter 34, verse 19. And who are the righteous? You are the righteous, once you become saved. So should you be afraid of encountered challenges? No, because the above verse of Hebrews chapter 4, verse 16 teaches that the grace is that supernatural force that has been made available to assist you with every need to meet those challenges. It is supernatural, appropriate help, supernatural, well-timed help, coming just when you need it. The road that you will walk as you strive to live a holy life free of sexual sin is not going to be an easy road, as you will encounter challenges and needs. But know that you have nothing to fear, as the grace of God is that supernatural force that has been made available to you by God to meet your every need. The grace of God is. 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 9 KJV. And he said unto me, My grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly therefore will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 9 NIV. But he said to me, My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 9 ISV. But he has told me, My grace is all you need, because my power is perfected in weakness. Therefore I will most happily boast about my weaknesses, so that the Messiah's power may rest on me. Above listed are the KJV, NIV, and ISV versions of 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 9. As you study the three above versions of 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 9, you will be able to gain a better knowledge and understanding of what truly is the grace of God. As you read the above KJV version of 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 9, you will witness God equating His grace to His strength. In the same KJV version of 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 9, you witness the grace of God being equated to the power of Christ. As you read and study the NIV version of 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 9, you learn that the grace of God is equated to God's power and Christ's power. And as you read and study the ISV version of 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 9, you learn that the grace of God is also equated to the Messiah's power. Based on these versions of 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 9, you should know that when you read about or encounter the grace of God in the Word of God, you are reading about and encountering the strength of God, the power of Christ, and the Messiah's power, as they are all the same. All of these previously mentioned are synonyms for the grace of God. When you seek the grace of God to manifest in your life, you are seeking the power of Christ, the Messiah's power, the power of God, and the strength of God to manifest in your life, as they are all the same. The grace of God equals the power of Christ, equals the strength of God, equals the Messiah's power, equals God's power. Prosagoge. Ephesians chapter 2 verse 8 NIV. For it is by grace you have been saved, through faith. Ephesians chapter 2 verse 8 AMPC. For it is by free grace, God's unmerited favor, that you are saved, delivered from judgment and made partakers of Christ's salvation, through your faith. In the above sections, the grace of God has been highlighted as a supernatural force that provides you with many benefits, such as an ability to serve God in a holy manner without sexual sin in this evil day and age. But how do you access the manifestation of the grace of God? One cannot just talk about the greatness of grace, being that thing to enable a person to live a holy life without sexual sin. They must also talk about how you spiritually access God's grace. Ephesians chapter 2 verse 8 teaches you how you access the grace of God. Ephesians chapter 2 verse 8 NIV states, For it is by grace you have been saved, through faith. Ephesians chapter 2 verse 8 states that it is via faith that you have access to the power of the grace of God. Romans chapter 5 verse 2 states, By whom also we have access by faith into this grace. The word access from Romans chapter 5 verse 2 is from the Greek word prosagoge. The Greek word prosagoge is defined as the act of bringing to, a moving to, access, approach. Blue Letter Bible 2016. From the above bullet points, you should understand what defines the Greek word prosagoge. It means access, approach, the act of bringing to, a moving to. And once you understand what defines the Greek word prosagoge, access, you should also understand that according to Romans chapter 5 verse 2, that you have access to the grace of God via faith. What is access? Access is defined as a way of getting near, at, or to something or someone, a way of being able to use or get something. Merriam-Webster 2015. Synonyms for the word access are contact and or connection. These two previously mentioned verses, Ephesians chapter 2 verse 8 and Romans chapter 5 verse 2, clearly teach that the grace of God is accessed via faith. Faith is the supernatural doorway that gives you access and connection to the grace of God. Without faith, you will not be able to connect with this supernatural power called the grace of God. You must have faith in the grace of God in order to access the grace of God.
Available on hardcover, audiobook, and ebook. Get yours today from Amazon, and be sure to visit us at whatgodsaysministries.com.